All right, everyone. Here we are. Good evening. Interesting class tonight. Ezrat Hashem. This will not be a boring class. So, here's the story. Los Angeles is happy because the Dodgers won. That's great. I'm not a baseball fan. But the amount of fireworks that went off this Saturday night and the whole last week, I get the sense that LA is on wheels. Okay, that's good. New York, whoever I am connected to in New York, is very sad because the results of the election last night are pretty intimidating and worrisome, to say the least. Anyways, Mamdani has won the election, and he's pretty much a very vocal and open anti-Semite. And that is a very scary thing for the largest, for a city that has the largest concentration of Jews outside of Israel. So it's not a laughing matter, it's a very, very serious matter. And it's, I'm not in New York, and I don't want to be in New York right now. So, but my relatives are in New York, family, relatives, everybody in here, and friends, and everyone else. But it's not all in New York. When something like that happens in New York, which is the economic or the capital of capitalism, the economic capital of the world, the super city, the city that never sleeps, the Big Apple. When something like that can happen in New York, its ripple effects are felt everywhere. So, how are Jews feeling in America? Anybody who's got a half a brain is not feeling good. There are insane Jews who don't see the writing on the wall. That is it's a problem, right? People can fool themselves as they want, as long as they want. This is not such good news, and I'm not here to depress you. I'm actually here to make you happy. Okay. So what's the spin? What's the holy spin on all of this? And how is it that we keep our heads focused and confident and strong and not panic and probably not worry too much to know that things are going to be really good? So in general, there is a general rule, and that is the Jewish people always win. And whenever there's a threat to their well-being, whoever it is that threatens them can maybe splash around, make a little noise, but then they disappear, float away in the annals of history, and they're gone. So this Mamdani and whoever else is supporting him and all these things, we won already. The Jewish people come out triumphant. The Jewish people come out stronger from every threat. Is that a comfort? Okay. Sometimes it costs us a lot until we see that. And I don't think anybody now is celebrating the fact that a potential big Purim can come our way from Mamdani having been elected. Just like no one would celebrate the news in the Persian times. When I say Persian times, I mean Persian times back in Persia, and also the Persian Times, I mean the newspaper Persian Times, or whatever, probably something like that, the Persian Post, the Persian Gazette, whatever it is, when it reported on the fact that Haman was appointed to be the chief minister of the Achashverosh and the Persian king. Okay, I'm sitting and talking, and I don't have the mic in front of me. Okay. Please remind the room to adjust the microphone. Yes, I did. Okay, good. I hope you hear me. I hope you heard. I was a little quieter, but I didn't have the mic. Hey, more than that. This thing is not even inside. How did that happen? I'll give you a minute. Give me a minute. Okay, so ridiculous. is ridiculous. Okay, I'm sorry. I did speak a little bit, but I think the computer picked up the sound. And now, I just want to make sure we're in on the right. You're hearing me better now. Can anybody? Hello? Someone leave a comment there and tell me if, because I plugged it in, I just want to make sure that now it's picking up automatically the sound that was missing. Anybody there? Tell me. Are we getting the right sound? Yeah, it's good. Thank you. Very good. Thank you. So, just to know that we are on the winning team is good, but still, still a little. So, what can I say to make everyone take a deep breath and say, not only not be worried, but actually, I think what happened last night in New York is actually telling us that we've entered literally the final stretch, and that the redemption is literally upon us. It's literally upon us. Listen here, I never believed that the redemption would just come without any drama. I mean, there are such statements from tzaddikim that it can just happen while everybody's busy doing their regular things. The shoemaker will be, sitting and banging in the nails on the shoes and so on and so forth. And it will be just an ordinary day, an ordinary afternoon in Moshiach. I don't know. It's hard. It was always hard for me to accept that. But if tzaddikim said, I said, okay. But the truth is, I think both are true. It can be in the most dramatic times, but the actual Mashiach's arrival could be within that. Life will continue as normal. Like the world is not going to stop because Mamdani has now won the election in New York. Not like everybody's going to just stop doing anything. Life is not going to come to a screeching halt. Life will continue. But I think the drama that this all that the coming of Moshiach is going to involve some kind of intensity. I think we're there. It's astounding. The fact that a 34-year-old inexperienced lawmaker, who was a lawyer or whatever he was, is now going into a position to run one of the most important, one of the most complicated cities in the entire world. And why New Yorkers would do something like that, to vote someone like that in. Someone who literally can destroy, and talking about New York is the capital of capitalism. And here you have a communist who's coming in. I mean, forget about the anti-Semitism. Forget about the Jew-hating elements that are all over the place from waiting to pass. But let's remove that. Just look at the idea of what kind of terrible and complete. I don't know what his ideas are regarding the police. What his ideas are regarding law and order. New York has been seeing tremendous and a lot of crime. God forbid, when you tie the hands of the police, when you remove and you allow the criminals go unchecked. New York City can turn in, God forbid, I don't want to say anything, literally like the jungle. It is utterly frightening in terms of crime, in terms of forcing people out of business because of the amount of taxation that are going to go in, and other things, and businesses all running away from New York. And what is that going to do to the New York economy? I mean, I just even begin to imagine what kind of destruction, God forbid, there could be. And why would people whose lives are not that good, but is livable, elect a someone who's maybe sleek and has good ads, but how people can be so ridiculously insane to put this guy in office is only tells us one thing. The sages tell us, "Ein adam over avera ela keinechnas by ruach shtus." A person does not commit a sin unless a spirit of stupidity, of foolishness, overcomes them. That means there are moments where the evil inclination can cloud a person's mind completely, that they literally can do absurdities, can do things that are completely harmful to themselves. They can shoot themselves and wound themselves or commit even suicide on some level. And they go ahead and do it deliberately. Why? Because they've been possessed by this force, by the spirit of foolishness that completely fogs their mind. And that applies to an individual human being. And sometimes the spirit of stupidity can overtake an entire society. And that's what happened in New York City, where people go ahead, and these people who voted him in are going to regret it big time. Of what kind of, God should protect. I don't want to predict anything bad, but it's almost inevitable that the city's going to go down the drain with this type of leadership. And many Jews voted for him too. It's like insane. He's against Israel. We all know that anti-Israel, what it really is. It's anti-Semitism, it's anti-Jewish people. No good. And why would people do that? It's literally, they were possessed. But why would God do that? So you're seeing that God generally allows people free choice. God generally allows people to make normal, sane incision. If there is suddenly a moment where God causes the masses to literally be retarded, right? The masses to literally become temporarily insane, there's no other explanation that God is seeking something. That God is spinning the wheel and landing or throwing the dice and landing it exactly where he wants it to land. Zoran Mamdani needed to be mayor in New York for the great final moment. That's what I feel. Am I right? I don't know. I'm guessing. But because you're watching something else which is also insane. You're watching on the far right also something just out of it just never happened. And right now it's taking place with the anti-Israel, which is anti-Jewish. I'll give you a little example. A family member of mine was walking down the street this Sabbath, Shabbos, right in front of our shul, right down the block, over here, middle of the day. It was morning. Okay, it was morning. And a car stopped. A guy rolls down his window, an Asian-looking guy, and he starts yelling with venom in his eyes and with hatred, without like Jew, like with such. I mean, this relative of mine, did not want to engage because the amount of hatred that was coming from this individual was like at a point where, if he was ready to explode, and who knows, could have, pulled a gun or something. That's what was coming out. And that's the temperament on the street. What happened over here, it's one guy. It's a lot of people like that are losing it with Jew hatred. Now, this relative of mine, He wasn't wearing an Israeli pin, what is Israel? He's Jewish. So why is this guy, he's an anti-Israel, why is he yelling at what's Israeli about him? There's nothing Israeli about this individual. He's wearing a black Hasidic garb, a black hat. What is that Israeli? What does that have to do with Israel's policy? If you're an anti-Zionist, why are you yelling at this person on the street? Did you speak to him and ask him his opinions, if he's a Zionist or not a Zionist? If he supports the state of Israel or not? If he's a Netanyahu supporter or not? And yet, this wrath, it's because there's no anti-Israel, it's anti-Jew. It's Jew hatred. Now, this Jew hatred has been sitting in the consciousness of the world as long as history is, from ancient times. Sages actually point to the moment that it really started, when the Jewish people stood at Sinai. Like this poison went into the bloodstream of the world to hate Jews. But it surfaces and it can lay dormant. And then there are moments when God snaps its finger for whatever reason, and that anti-Semitism suddenly spirals out of control. And it says in Rabbeinu Bechaya, at the end of the Parsha Shemos, that seconds, literally, minutes, like in a very short period right before the coming of Moshiach, there will be an explosion of anti-Semitism. Now that has been going on for the last 2 years in a way that we haven't unprecedented since October 7th. But even more so in the last couple of months, because what's astounding is that generally the anti-Semitism, this anti-thing, was coming very strongly from the left, and the right was very supportive of Israel. And of course, there was always the neo-Nazis, there was always the extreme right, but they were seen as a very, very small, dangerous group that were small. I say relatively small. What's happening now is that this is becoming normalized. They're getting voices from mainstream media that are giving them microphones, and they're giving them an ability to bring their message to millions and millions of people whose ears are opening up and they're beginning to accept these. And this is super, 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 super dangerous. If it wasn't for what I was going to share with you, it is super, 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 super scary and super dangerous. It literally puts us right back to the 1930s in Germany. I mean, God forbid this can spiral out of control in no time. And Jews would be caught in the middle, from between the right and the left. Because I'm talking about people like Tucker Carlson, and the other lady, whatever her name is, I won't mention her name. Insane. Well, she was just a normal Candace Owens, a normal, political commentator, and whatever you call these people, where she suddenly went off the deep end with Jew hatred. And this has become the hot topic. And these people have millions of followers. And Nick, whatever his name, Fuentes, whatever, that was just given to Tucker, took him on. That's the rabid anti-Semite who admires Hitler. So, and now suddenly this extreme, very verbal, openly Jew hater becomes the mayor in the city that has the most Jews in the world. I mean, you couldn't, who would have ever imagined that even begins to be possible? If not for, clearly, this is happening by the hand of God. What we are watching is God kicking up the dust. like only God can, creating a dust storm in front of us. Now, why would God be doing that? I'm not a prophet. So there's two possibilities. Now, this is where I'm trying to direct everybody. In other words, the fact that this is by the hand of God is without a question. Everything is by the hand of God. But sometimes there is life, things that are kind of expected, things that are normal, things that are within the range of the possible. And of course, if you have faith, you know that God is directing every little thing, even the movement of a little leaf. Even as natural as that, God is directly involved. Fine. But it's working from within the system. What's called miraculous. A miracle is when something utterly unexpected and abnormal happens. But usually when we speak about a miracle, we're talking about a miracle for good. This seems to be a super, super, super bad miracle. And that's what I'm saying. It seems to be just definitely without God interfering and making the majority of New York City voters absolutely retarded and causing the mainstream right of America to suddenly, out of nowhere, no one can see this. I mean, happening just I don't know how long it's been brewing for the last year, but it became so open and so grotesque just recently. Is like, what's going on here? Scary. And you'd say, okay, so pick yourself up and run to Israel. Israel's so safe. Trump also lost his mind. Calls for Israel to stop the war while Hamas has still not been eradicated. Is calling for an international presence in Gaza, which is the worst idea possible. Things like this never work. They only cause huge problems. And there's something else that scares me. I don't want to be a doomsday prophet, but possibly. I'm looking ahead for the next few months. The Democrats had a very, very big victory. They had a considerable victory in the elections yesterday. California, Prop 50 passed, which is going to redistrict California, which is going to affect the Senate. So whether Trump still has a chance for another year, until next year's election, to try to push through a little bit of his agenda. Now the government is a government shutdown, and the Democrats are probably getting more confident and more brazen to fight him. Question is that Trump in the very foreseeable future might end up as a lame duck president who can't really do too much on what he wants in terms of policy in the United States. If he loses the majority of the House, it'll be like he was kind of very restricted at the end of his first term. If that's going to happen, where does it leave him in terms of leaving a legacy? He's going to only have 2 more years, and Trump is very much into his own image and his own legacy. What is he going to have to be able to say for himself that I accomplished something? His only possible achievement that could be, again, I'm just guessing, is going to be that he can claim that he made peace in the Middle East. Now, the only way he's going to get peace in the Middle East right now, God forbid, is if he's going to, his easiest way, I'm not saying the only way, his easiest way of getting it done is if he puts which he's been doing till now, is putting enormous pressure on Israel. Instead of putting pressure on Hamas and so on and so forth, he puts this pressure on Israel. God forbid he causes more concessions from Israel in order to get a peace, an Abraham Accord with the Saudis and the Qataris and whoever else, but at the expense of the safety of the Jewish people in Israel. So what are we gaining them? Jews can go to Israel. Who says Israel's going to be any safer? And then Trump leaves office, and who knows who else goes back into office. I mean, I don't want to scare anybody, but this doesn't look good. So what I'm seeing over here is that basically there's this a lot of dark things coming around from all corners, and the Jewish people being caught in the middle of between a rock and a hard place. And this could be very intimidating and scary. So, how am I going to help you tonight? How am I going to help you? How am I going to help myself? How am I going to share something? So, let's begin. Let's begin unpacking some really wild stuff. So remember last year we were talking the entire year, we were quoting the Midrash and telling us all about the star that's going to rise in a period of 70 days in which Moshiach is going to gain control over the world. We pointed out last year how everything happened exactly, beginning with the attack on Nasrallah on the 25th day of Elul, when the new star will be seen. Everything happened exactly. Major, powerful threats, existential threats to the Jewish people were removed. Iran's nuclear weapons were taken out. Assad fell. Hezbollah was devastated. I mean, Israel secured tremendous victories last year and tremendous removal of real threats to their safety. There's also a miracle that happened before all this is happening now. So we've had this major, major victory last year. Literally, word for word. And then the Zohar says a new king will rise from the world, and others will try to fight him, and he will get control, which very, very much seemed to be depicting last year's election, the 2024 election, when Donald Trump won the election, where it describes a person whose spirit is going to be arrogant over all the kings of the world. But then it describes the last and grand finale of that. It speaks about an earthquake, which we discussed, or the earth shattering, which we discussed as a political earthquake next to the temple, Migdash, and we discussed that that's Damascus. Damascus is Damascus. The entire fall of Syria, Assad. And it says in the Zohar that from that moment and onward, and I brought you last year also a Midrashic source from Shimon Bar Yochai, which says clearly that when the ruler of Damascus will fall, you will know that Moshiach is here. And it's consistent with the Zohar over here. He says from that earthquake and onward, a branch or a bird will emerge from that cave beneath the temple, and to him kingship will be given. And to him all the holy ones will gather. So the Zohar has some kind of a image of it. So we discussed that all happened in the past year. Now it seems like we're going backwards with this Mamdani win, with all this sudden rise in anti-Semitism. So let me read to you the state of the Zohar. When you read it inside, Mahima Arta from that cave is all these events that we discussed happened last year. Either a bird or Ampa, a ruler that will rule over the whole world. Moshiach. To him kingdom will be given. The Kaddish El Yoin and his country, and the supernal holy ones will gather to him. That's how Mashiach will be revealed in the world. And to him kingship will be given. And the people of the world, at the time when he will be revealed, in the time of this Mashiach will be revealed, will find themselves in trouble after trouble. Sad. In other words, it's going to be bad news and then bad news. And this is the line I wanted. Yisrael is Gabrun, and the enemies of Israel will become mighty. This is the grand finale. The enemies of the Jewish people will become strong. Kedain, so that sets the tone. Yitar rucha de Mashiach alayhu, And then the spirit of Mashiach will be awakened upon them. It's got to be a confrontation. There's got to be someone who's going to challenge Mashiach. We have to have a Pharaoh that Moshe can come to and pick up his stick and say, let the Jews out, or else you're going to get boiled on your body. There's got to be somebody. Now, again, does Mashiach have to be? But it seems like that's what we're heading to. That there are being put into position major forces against the Jewish people for Mashiach to take on these forces. For him to reveal God through the defeat of all these Jew haters. And that's what it says over here. The Yeshetze le'Edom chayava, and Mashiach will destroy the wicked elements of Edom. The Chol Ara de Seir, in the lands of Seir, Yoikid Benuda, he's going to burn in a fire, whatever that means. Fire, literally. Yeah. But I like the next line. I'm skipping a little. And in that time, Yakum Kuchibirichu, the Messiah, the Amen. Hashem at that time is going to wake up and bring them up, the dead of his people. Which means we're going to watch the resurrection take place. Those of you who have been following the class have been hearing, and I mentioned many times that this year, according to another Zohar, is the beginning of the era of resurrection. Because the period of resurrection is a 210-year period, or a 214-year period. If it's 210, it starts in 4 years from now, in 2030. Because we're talking about 210. We're talking about 210 years before the year 6000. So the year 6000 comes out to be in the year 2240. So 210 years before that is 2140, 2040, and 10 years before that is 2130. So 210 is by the year 2030. There's an opinion that happens in Rabbi Yitzchak that it's before that, it's 214, which puts it in this year, which is the year 2026, or the Hebrew year 5786. Now, so the Zohar, when it describes this situation, there's going to be enormous friction and the enemies of Israel are going to be so strong, and the Jewish people are going to be not in a good state. And in the midst of this, Moshiach will appear, and there's going to be the resurrection. But hold it, don't you learn that the resurrection is happening 40 years after the gathering of the exile? So we discussed in the earlier classes, it must be that we're not talking about the actual resurrection for everyone. We're talking about the early resurrection. In other words, the grand entrance of Mashiach in the world is very possible. To me, it's not just very possible, to me, it's absolutely so. Will involve a resurrection of an individual. And not just one individual, but I think he will come back with quite a few helpers. The great tzaddikim will come along with Mashiach. Now, if you remember in a class earlier, this is what puts Mamdani right in the center of all this, which is really cool. Because the Zohar brings, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, this is the Zohar and Parshas Toldos, when it says 214 years, it gives a proof. What's the proof? It says, V'yerd miyam al yam, that he will rule. I'm sorry. It says regarding Mashiach, V'yerd miyakov, that a ruler from Jacob will will rise a major ruler, a dominating power. Ve'evid sarid me'ir, and he will remove the remaining surviving governments from the city. So let's analyze this and watch this. This is unbelievable. V'yerd miyakov, a ruler will rise from Jacob. So the Zohar, how do we know 214 years? The Zohar looks at the word yerd. Yerd, it's a verse in the end of the Torah portion of Balak in Numbers. I don't remember which chapter it is. The Yerd, Miyakov, Yerd is Yud Resh Dalet, which equals 214. The question I asked in an earlier class doesn't say anything about resurrection. It says a ruler will get up from Jacob. So what does that do with resurrection? Moshiach's coming happens 40 years before the resurrection. The Zohar itself says it in that Zohar, that over there. So what does it say? What is it bringing the verse? All it says in the word is that a ruler from Jacob will come forth. So and the word v'yer, which means a ruler, at the same time, the Zohar takes that word to say that it means there's going to be resurrection. 214. So my thought, again, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, is no, because the Zohar knew that Moshiach himself is going to be also, because it says Moshiach will be revealed, and we're learning about that much more today. Moshiach will be revealed, he will be concealed, and we reveal it. And his concealment involves a passing, and his revelation involves a resurrection. And that Mashiach is of those that are, he's the first one, obviously, to come as in his resurrected form. So by the very fact that it says the Yerd Miyakov, that a ruler, which is Mashiach, will dominate, will come forth, the Zohar says it's giving you also the time when that will happen, 214. If I'm right, now I'm not going to go into this whole discussion about how Mashiach, what's the proof that Mashiach can be from those that are resurrected, and on all of that. That's not for this class. I'm not going there. I've spoken about it quite extensively, and we spoke about it. It's not for now. But what's interesting to me is it said immediately after that, he will remove the heaven. He will destroy Sarid, the survivors, Meir from the city. Which city? So you look at Rashi over there. Rashi says, from the most important city of Rome, Meir Chashuva Sheberoimi, the Roman most important city. There will be a ruler in that city, and he's going to dethrone that ruler. So 2 months ago, I'm talking about this, and my guess was Mamdani is going to win, and Moshiach is going to take him down. I mean, I didn't have to be too of a great prophet to tell you that Mamdani is going to win. He was already winning in all the polls back then. It was looking, no one wanted to believe it. Not anybody Jewish didn't want to believe it. But we didn't want to deal with something as dark as this. Again, I'm making the suggestion that when it says Mashiach will have a confrontation, he's going to have a confrontation with this new ruler. Why is he called the survivor? Because as I told you last year, most of the massive Jew haters in the world were obliterated. All the leaders of Hamas were taken out. Assad had to run to Russia. Nasrallah is dead. Many other, the Raisi, who was the rabid anti-Semite of Iran, was killed. Other major generals and leaders in the Iranian military were completely decimated. Governments in the United States that were absolutely anti-Israel in a huge way. Previous government, which was even though Trump makes mistakes, I believe he's at heart a friend of the Jewish people. He believes sincerely that he's helping out when sadly he's making the same mistake he made in his first term. I'm not going to go into explaining that right now. But I don't believe he's a bad guy. But the people that were in power till now were not friends of the Jewish people and did not. And they fell. Just like God made the people in New York be retarded, be completely, lose their minds. God made Biden have a debate with Trump and lose his mind during the debate. Okay, we knew that he was pretty not there with it, but they wouldn't have put him up on the debate if they weren't sure that he can perform. The fact that his brain got jammed during the thing was an act of God. It's like the same act of God that made Trump move his head like this when the bullet hit. I mean, literally, you're watching God in play now in American politics and everything in the world. It's stunning. And the fact that they chose this ridiculous candidate like Harris, who can't get 3 sentences out of her mouth that make sense. It was all God making and setting this all up. So you watched how God took down so much of the evil in the world. And colleges that allowed this anti-Israel stuff was defunded. There was so much that happened in which, like, the wickedness was removed. And remember last year we discussed at a great length that last year, 85, was the year of the circumcision. Mila, because 85 is Gematria Mila. We discussed that in class. It was a circumcision. We got cut away all the klipot, all the impurity. But what's left? Survival. Somehow one rabid anti-Semite manages to grab power. In where? In New York City. Why? Because we need to have someone from Moshiach to have a little fun. Yeah, I might be wrong. I don't know. I'm sharing with you my thoughts. This is what occurred to me when I read that verse. The heaven. So who is it referring to? And you can listen. I said it 2 months ago, or a month and a half ago. Started to make years referring, and that's the most important city of Rome. The United States is the modern day Rome. It's the power of the Rome, which is one singular kingdom depicted in Daniel, which we'll learn about soon, which is the final kingdom, which goes through as first it begins as Rome, then it evolves into Christianity and the Christian countries and the Christian West, and then it becomes the United States that's the superpower. And what's the power of the United States? Its economy. And what's the nucleus of the United States economy? Always been New York City, Wall Street, and the like. And in a sense, you can say Wall Street has fallen. Because I'm sorry, that New York has fallen. And if that's the case, the power, the financial center of the world and of American power has just collapsed last night. If New York goes, But most important is Moshiach hangs out in the city of Rome, as we discussed. So New York City is Moshiach's city. And I'm unapologetically insisting, based on everything the Rebbe said and everything the Rebbe did, that he's the only candidate for Moshiach. And he is in New York. Happens to be that every single candidate in New York City who wanted to defeat Mamdani went to pray by the river. Cuomo went there. And Curtis Lewa went there. He should have gotten out of the race. He's also not too smart. At least he would have allowed Cuomo to. But again, God didn't let him do it either. But they all went to pray by the Rebbe. They all went to pray by the only one who didn't go was Mamdani. The others went to pray by the Rebbe. Why? And Trump also went. Isn't that the weirdest thing? All these big politicians who need a blessing. This time it wasn't meant to be for a reason. Because it's Mashiach's job himself to take down the Hevid and when the Yerd. When he's going to rule. When is he going to rule? Yerd, the Zohar says. When he's going to be resurrected. When is he resurrected? Year 214. So what we watched yesterday might be watching the grand show. You know, when you're watching UFC fight, I wish I was to say that I'm so holy that I never saw a UFC fight. But I did see. It's exciting. I didn't see it live, but I see it on YouTube. But one of the first fighter goes into the ring. He runs around and he goes like this, and he dances to music, and he's showing off his muscles and strength and his all those guys or whatever. And he's like, so you watched the first guy enter the ring last night. Now we're waiting for Moshiach to enter the other side, and you're going to watch a magnificent bout. But there's only one winner. That's my thought. Again, I might be proven wrong, and I wish I'm proven wrong because I would rather not have the drama. But I think we're up for some pretty interesting days ahead of us. Okay, how am I so confident that it's this year? Other than the Zohar with the 214 and all of that, what are the signs that we're talking about this year? I want to bring you to something that I kept away from the last couple of years because when I heard about this from a different rabbi who very publicly, and he's very, very well spoken and has incredible, extensive knowledge on this particular subject. And I heard his talk on it. I was blown away by what he was saying, but I utterly rejected it, and I didn't want to hear what he was saying, simply because I was not a person, or can be a person, who you can tell me that Moshiach is coming in a long time from now. Even if that long time means 5 years. I wasn't going to hear it. I wasn't going to have it. We want Moshiach now. That's the way the Rebbe taught us. We want Moshiach now. We do not accept that Moshiach is coming next year, 3 years, 5 years. This particular rabbi was also a Chabad Chassid. However, he got on YouTube and he gave 2 or 3 classes in which he claimed that he cracked the end time prophecy code. It was a very brazen, I would say, declaration to say. He said it with absolute certainty that he cracked the code that all Jewish scholars from all of time tried to figure out. He did not figure it out. Obviously, he caught my curiosity and I followed his classes. But when his conclusion was that the time of the Mashiach is actually right now, this year, in 5786 and 5787, which is basically this year and next year, and he was saying this in 57, when was he saying this? In 5721. Literally not in 57, yeah, 5721, which was still in 2020. He basically hit the airwaves after Biden won the election. And Trump was contesting it. And there was all that tension in the United States. That's when this rabbi got, I'll tell you, Rabbi Weisberg. And he began a whole series of lectures. And during those lectures, he spoke about this end time. This was actually his first lecture, the first 3 or 4 of them, and they were fascinating. And he makes the claim over there that it says in the Torah that the end time prophecy, which is stated in Daniel, which was under lock, it was locked and the key was thrown away. No one can open it up. When I say no one can open it up, no one can decode what Daniel was saying, what Daniel heard from the angel. The angel basically comes to Daniel and gives him a very precise date of when the exile will end and the Mashiach will come. Daniel, but the angel says that it's encrypted and it's hidden, and you can crack her head open, you're not going to figure it out. So but you know what? Just because we're told we're not allowed to figure it out, that actually makes it tempting to want to figure it out. So every rabbi, all the great rabbis tried to decode it. Because everybody wants to know when Moshiach is coming. That is the biggest mystery of all time. Everybody wants to know when is Moshiach coming. The secret of all secrets. So, throughout all of history, when the great rabbis gave their interpretations, and their interpretations turned out to be, no, Mashiach, those dates came and went, and the Messiah has not arrived. So you would expect to give up, but this rabbi did his little research, and he said, so this is what he said. He says that, I think he brings it in the name of the Zohar, that that all this that we will not be able to crack that code is until Mashiach's arrival. But when we get very close to the time of Mashiach, I think the Zohar says even little children will be able to figure it out. It will, in other words, as we get close, we'll realize what it is. So therefore, he makes the claim that he figured it out. He says, listen, there's no question that we're close. And it's not my fault I'm a rabbi. I'm saying that. I'm not worse than a little child. If a child can figure it out, let me be a child that figures it out. And what he said makes perfect sense to me when I heard it then, but I was vehemently not willing to accept it, even though he made sense. Because at that time we were watching such Mashiach drama. The last 10 years, things have been crazy. So who wants to accept, another 5 years, another 6 years? Please. God forbid. But this year, when we finally arrived to the time, I went back to his classes and listened to them again, and did my own research. And this is what I want to share with you tonight, and that will make everybody calm and happy that Moshiach is just about here. If you remember in my earlier classes, we were talking about this, that it says that the gathering of the exiles is going to be 40 years before the resurrection. The resurrection. And remember, when I was speaking about that this year is the year of the resurrection, or at least according to one opinion of the Zohar, this is the year of the resurrection, then 40 years before that, there must have been a gathering of the exile. What was that? So we spoke about the Iron Curtain being taken down, which happened in 1989, 1990. So it's not 40 years from now, it's 40 years from the second date given in the Zohar, which is 210 years. Which again puts us in the year 2030. So 40 years before that is 1990. 1989, 1990, that's when the Iron Curtain came down, and Jews were able to immigrate from Russia by the millions. That's a gathering of the exiles, as the Rebbe explicitly stated. Or at least it's the beginning of the gathering of the exiles. Now, discussed in that class, Gorbachev became premier of Russia in 1985. And that's when the Rebbe already predicted that Russia will open up its doors. Although Gorbachev himself later admitted that he had no plans of doing this. At the time, the Rebbe was the one who predicted it. But the Rebbe was speaking prophecy. So that's why we can say that the period of the 40 years begins already in 1986. Which leads us, basically, so everything is fitting. But the Zohar says that those 40 years are going to be the most darkest years. And these last 40 years have not been a picnic. Think about global terror, think about all that has been happening, culminating in October 7th and all the anti-Semitism around the world since then. And I'm not even talking, by the way, I didn't make anybody depressed yet. Let's add to the state of the Jewish people in England, the state of the Jewish people in France, the state of the Jewish people in all the European countries. Forget about it. Lest I remind everyone, exactly a year ago, what happened in Amsterdam, the program that went on, when they had the soccer game. It was scary stuff. All Israeli fans coming home from the game were attacked on the street, pursued, chased after, knifed. I mean, you couldn't believe this stuff. That's Europe. We thought at least America is safe. Canada, forget about it. So this has been a dark 40 years. But what I'm saying is that we've arrived to the end of it. So it's a little intense now for a few minutes. And Hashem should protect every single Jew across the world. But at least when we understand what this is and where it's leading to, we can take a breath and just daven to Hashem that no one should be hurt. It's all the fear, that the drama of the fear itself, what could have happened, that should be more than enough. Okay, but I want to introduce to you, we spoke the number 40 years, but I would like to introduce to you 45 years. If we are introducing 45 years, so we go from this year, 1986 would be 40 years. 1985 would be 41. 84 would be 42. 83 would be 43. And 82 would be 44. 81, 82. The very important number over here is going to be 1982. Something happened in 1982 that is huge. And 45 years later lands us in 2026 and 2027. And let's take the book of Daniel and do a little bit of a thing here. Daniel is shown a vision in chapter 7 of the book of Daniel. And then in chapter 12, there's again a discussion on the same thing. Daniel is basically shown the vision of the four beasts, basically, which depict the four exiles of the Jewish people. It gives a kind of gives him a tour. The prophecies that he's shown is showing him the dark. It's like last week in the Torah portion when Abraham was shown by God this great darkness and all that is going to befall his children, which represented all the four exiles. Daniel has a similar vision, but by him it's very dramatic. With him seeing beasts and it's frightening. One stronger than the next. And then in the end, he's shown this worst of the beasts, and each one of them looking differently, and how the beasts looked, and iron teeth and horns, and a ram and a goat, and monsters made up of bronze and of metal and of gold, and the whole thing is. And then the angels explain these are different empires. He gets the interpretation in the book as well. But then the big question is, how long is this last empire going to last? And this last empire is supposed to be the most vicious of all. So, I'll read to you from Daniel chapter 7, verse 25. I'm reading to you from the English. This is in the Steinsaltz translation. That this last king, meaning the empire, he will speak words against the Most High, which is God, and will demolish the holy of the Most High. He will destroy the temple. He will think of changing the holy and commemorative times. He will change or eliminate their observances and will do away with the law. And they, the holy ones, will be delivered into his hands until a time and a time and a half a time will have passed. That's it. They want to know how long he will be king. Here's the teaser. A time plus a time plus a half a time. A period of time plus another period of time and another half a time. Okay, now you can really figure it out, right? Okay. So Rashi says in Daniel that this is a big mystery. Rashi says in Daniel, give me a second over here. And Rashi says that the pictures of the, Rashi says, Kate Sasamu. This is a hidden case. It's a hidden in time. Daniel, well, and it wasn't supposed to be revealing. It was supposed to be just a teaser. It said to Daniel, Sasam Advar hide it, the chasom, and seal it. Now Rashi continues, the early codifiers who were trying to unlock this, everybody gave their interpretation on the time and another time and a half time. But Rashi says, all the predictions passed already in the days of Rashi, and Moshiach still didn't arrive. This fourth beast is still in power. Rashi was living in the days of the Crusaders, where Jews were at the peak of persecution from the fourth beast. Well, Rashi decides that he's not going to shy away, and he's going to make an attempt of figuring it out. The Yeshwan Rashi said, well, I saw why. Rashi's obviously going to look for an interpretation of the end time. Number one, that didn't pass yet, because if it passed before Rashi, like some of the interpretations that Rashi said, that passed already. Rashi doesn't want that interpretation, because that would be very depressing. That the end time passed and there was no redemption. On the other hand, Rashi's not going to pick one that's going to be very, very far off, because that's also going to be completely demoralizing and very, very depressing. If Rashi's going to say that it's going to take another 1,000 years from it. So Rashi finds an interpretation that suits the words, that is not too far off from where Rashi lived. And when we say not too far off, sadly, I think Rashi lived in the 10th century, or I think Rashi lived in the 11th century. But it was still 200-300 years ahead of it. And Rashi is going to land this time in the end of the 1300s. In 1397, 1398. How do you come to that? Rashi says like this. Rashi says, you know what the time and the other time and the half time mean? It means 1,335 years. 1335. That's the amount of time. And Rashi says, and I'll tell you why. Why is it called a time and another half? I'll tell you in a moment why. But until I tell you, Rashi says, I want you to know that's a very important number, 1335. Remember that number, 1335. Because that's the exact number that is given in the end of Daniel. It says, fortunate are those who wait to the 1335 years. Now, most people who read the 1335 until Rashi didn't put it together that that's what it says over here, a time and a half a time actually equals 1335. If you know how to count a time and a half a time, it's 1335. But that's the 1335. So Rashi kind of takes these two verses based on Rabbi Sadia Gaon, who was actually maybe 150, 200 years before Rashi, and merges them together. And he says the time and the half time with what it says at the end of the book of Daniel, 1335. So let's stop for a moment. What does it mean then? First of all, how does a time and a half time equal 1330? So Rashi comes up with this interpretation. The time and the half time, the time and the time are the good days that Israel had. Which time? The good days. What were the good days? The day we left Egypt, that's when the good days began. Now, the first period of that time, the first time, is from the day we left Egypt until the first temple was built. Why not continue into the first temple? Because that's not just a time, that's even a better time. The temple is actually standing in Jerusalem. So the first period is from the time the Jews left Egypt until the temple was built. And Rashi says that was 480 years. 40 years they wandered in the desert, and then the temple was built 440 years after they came into the land of Egypt. So together it's 480. That's the time. What's the next time? The time that the first temple stood. The first temple stood for 410 years. So 440 plus 410 gives you 850 years. No, I'm saying no. 480, not 440. That was a mistake. 480. The first period, the first time is 480. Plus the 410 of the temple gives you 890. 890 years following 890. What's the half time? Half time is both. You take both these times together and then make half of it. Pretty good trick, right? So now take 890 and divide it. Is what? 435. 445. So add on to the 890, 445, 1335. That's the time. Okay. 1335. When do you? The question now the big question is, when do you start the 1335? So you would think from when this empire managed to gain control over the Jewish people. When they destroyed the temple. When Rome destroyed the temple, count 1335. Rashi, however, says, based on what it says at the end of Daniel, that there's a verse there that says that it mentions 1335, but it says 1335 from when the constant, me'es usar hatamid, from when the constant was ended, was removed. What's the constant? Rashi learns the constant meant the daily offering of the karban tamid. The daily offering of the karban tamid. That means every day they would offer 2 lambs in the temple. From when that ceased and they stopped offering that, that's when you count it. Why? Because in the end of Daniel, it says these words. Chapter 12. Ume'es husar hatami. And from the time the constant was removed. Velases shikut shani. An abominable, as you translate over here. Let me give you, I don't have the fancy words for it. Let me give you the fancy words. Here we go. From the time of the abolishing of the continuum. Talmud means the continuum, which is, as he says, daily burnt offering. And the setting of a desolating, detestable thing. Instead, in its place of the Talmud, a setting of a desolating, detestable thing. How much time will pass? There will be 1,290 and 90. Basically 1290. And didn't we just say 1335? No, it gives a different number. Because it's trying to confuse you. It's telling you 1290, which 1,290 years. However, the next verse says, happy is the one who waits and reaches 1,335 years. So it tells you like this. The time that will elapse will be 1290, but happy are those who waited out to 1335. From when? From when the constant, the continual was stopped. So Rashi says, back to our Rashi over here. Rashi says, that the 1335, that this 1335 that we're talking about over here has to be counted from 6 years before the temple was destroyed. 6 years before the temple was destroyed. Why? Because they stopped offering the daily lamb in the temple because the Romans and all what was going on, the temple was already chaotic. It didn't just fall overnight. It was chaotic for a period before. Rashi says it was 6. I don't know how Rashi knew that exactly. 6 years before. I'll tell you how Rashi knows it. He brings it actually over here. From where we know. Getting the right sound. It makes sense that it's not getting the right sound because this was disconnected. So maybe it's now it's on. You can go over here to get the. Is it better now? Because I know what happened. Yeah. What? It's better. Okay. So how do we have the oh, hold on. So Rashi says here, sorry, let's go back over here. V'hu ihusar, and the tamid was removed. Sheish shanim lifnei achorban, 6 years before the destruction. Okay. Anyways, so you have to count 6 years before the temple was destroyed. So if you look on, if you Google when the temple was destroyed, you will find that the temple was destroyed in the year 70 AD. That means in our modern day count of years, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem was destroyed in the year 70. I know the Alter Rebbe says that the temple was destroyed in the year 68. So I'm going to use that count. I'm going to count from 68, not 70. If we count from the year 68 and we count 1335, we have to go back 6 years before that. Because again, we're trying to figure out what the 1335 years are, according to Rashi's interpretation. It's 1335 minus, the year 68 minus 6 is the year 62. So from the year 62 AD, you count 1335, you land in the year 1397. So on the year, according to Rashi, the year 1397 would have been the year of the redemption. Now Rashi lived in the year, I think, somewhere in the 900s or 1,000. I'm not exactly sure when Rashi lived. So Rashi was predicting a redemption 200 years ahead of him, or 300 years ahead of him. Still staring down a long, dark exile. Especially when you lived in those days, to think that the redemption is only in another 300 years must have been very painful for Rashi. But that was his prediction. But 1397 came, and 1497 came, and 1597 came, and 1697 came, and 1797, and 1897, and 1997,
and a lot of tears and a lot of bloodshed and a lot of Jewish blood flowing in the world, and darkness and difficulties, and Mashiach still hasn't arrived. So, is there a different interpretation for what this could mean? So again, this is just one Rashi. There are other commentators who give their decodifications of it. What does it mean? A time and another time and a half a time. But again, one thing is for sure, the numbers 1290 and the numbers 1335 is stated explicitly, but that's not stated as the explicitly that that's the time that this empire will rule until it will fall and the Beis Hamikdash will be restored. It says you have to kind of put together the pieces in the end of Daniel with what it says in chapter 7. Rashi does that really well. He picks the same numbers. He shows you how a time and a half a time is the same number that it mentions in the end. But Rashi's choosing to the start time to start it at 6 years before the destruction of the temple. So here is where Rabbi Weisberg, that I listened to, offered his interpretation, and he said that he was willing to go to bat for that's the correct one. He said that maybe we're talking about something else. It says the removal of the constant and when they placed a abomination, a detestable abomination on its place. So Rashi doesn't say, what does it mean they place something on its place? Rashi just says they removed the carbon tum and place anything on its place. But other commentators said that right after the temple was destroyed, so there was about a 50-year period later when we had the uprising of the Jewish people against the Roman to try to overthrow the Romans and rebuild the temple. And that was during the reign of Hadrian. And Emperor Hadrian came and he decimated the Jewish people after he finally crushed their rebellion, their Bar Kokhba uprising. And what he did was he came to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem after it was already destroyed 50 years earlier. And in order that Jews should never come back there or think they'll ever get it again, he built a temple for, I think, Jupiter. A temple of idol worship, a pagan temple on that spot. And he changed the name of Jerusalem as Palestina. And I think he prohibited Jews to come there. They told them they were still coming the 3 pilgrimage holidays, even though I think there were many, many prohibitions that would stop the Jews from dreaming that they're ever coming back to Jerusalem. Which, of course, no one can change because we will always dream of Jerusalem. That's how many commentators say. It's referring to Hadrian's position. So according to that, you're not going to count from when Rashi counted, as we, again, beginning of the year 62, maybe 50 years later when they put that temple. But according to Rabbi Weisberg's interpretation, which he feels that he cracked open the end time prophecy, you don't start this 1290 till many years later. Fast forward many years later. Because we have to think about which thing was placed on the Temple Mount. That was an abomination. But before we go there, let's first touch upon one more thing. What's with this number of 1290 and then 1335? In the first verse, it says 1290, and the next verse, it says 1335. What's the difference between the two? 45 years. Remember I said 45 years is very important. So Rashi asks, it makes no difference when we start. Let's first try to figure out the discrepancy of 1290, 1335. Which one is it? So Rashi says, very simple, Mashiach comes twice. That means Mashiach will appear, he will say hello, he will wave, then he will go into concealment, and then he will reappear 45 years later. And that's the difference of 12. At the end of 1290, hello, I'm here. he will skip town for 45 years, and then he will return. That's why it mentions 1290. And in those 45 years, many of those who believed in him will give up on him. That's why the verse says, Ashrei Amachaka, fortunate are those who do not throw in the towel. Fortunate are those who stick it out and stay in the game, because it's not going to be easy during those 45 years. Let me show you where Rashi says it. This Rashi I quoted many times, but now you're getting more context. So Rashi says, Lekeit Sayamin. Oh, no, not here. No, second to the last pasuk in Daniel. Rashi says, Ashrei Amachaka arba'im v'chamishanim. Fortunate are those who wait the 45 years, noisafim, after the 1290 years. Al cheshbon elyon. Why do you have to wait an extra 45 years? Rashi says, Sha'asid mishichenu le'izkasais, that our Messiah will be hidden. Achar shenigla, after he is revealed. The Yashuv Yizgala, and he will then return and appear again. All those rabbis who say Mashiach has one chance and he cannot come again, they're saying that because they're so scared of Jesus, of Yashke. Yashke is not Mashiach, not because he died, not because of any of that stuff. He's not Mashiach because he doesn't even have the tiniest one quality of Mashiach. Mashiach needs to bring all the Jewish people to observance. Moshiach needs to strengthen Jewish people and make it good for Israel, not make it bad for the Jewish people. Not murder millions and millions of Jews, which because of him were murdered. Not create a new religion. That's not Moshiach. But the notion that Mashiach will appear and be hidden and appear again, Rashi lived in a pretty Christian country. Rashi had to deal with the missionaries and with all the forces that tried to claim that Jay is the Messiah. And yet Rashi didn't shy away from saying that we, the Jewish people, have a belief that Mashiach will be revealed. He will be hidden and will be revealed again, because it says so in the Midrash, and Rashi had no problem with the Midrash. It says so openly. But how long would that take from when he's revealed to when he's concealed, and when he's revealed again? 45 years. So that's now we have the 1290 and the 1335. Both of them are correct dates. The only thing we don't know is when you started. So the dates that all the rabbis gave for this time started much earlier, and they ended already. But Rabbi Weisberg came up with something very, very simple. He said, take a look what's on the Temple Mount. There is a detestable thing on the Temple Mount, and that is the Dome of the Rock. Go to Israel, go to the Kotel, or go anywhere in Jerusalem, look over, and you'll see that there is something sitting on our temple spot. And that's a silver dome or a gold dome, and it's sitting right over there. And why is it called a detestable abomination? Is because on the dome, it has inscriptions from the Quran that claim and state that Muhammad was a much greater prophet than Moses, and therefore Islam is superior to Judaism and superior to the Torah of Moshe. And there's a kind of a higher prophecy that overrides Moshe's Torah. Although Moshe was a prophet, but there is a higher authority and a higher prophecy, and so on and so forth. And that's a desecration to the Torah and to God's word in this world. So let's find out when the Dome of the Rock was built. Let's find out when the Dome of the Rock was built. Year the Dome of the Rock was built. AI. The Dome of the Rock was built between 685 and 691 or 692, with its completion date established as 691, 692. Okay. So take out your calculator, and we do 692 plus 1290. And that lands us in 1982. It was 691. You know what I completed? And we go plus 1335. Let's go already to the 1335. We end up in the year 2026. This is this year. This year, next year, fine. Depending if the Dome of the Rock was 691, 692. That means we're actually at the end day now. So, should it not shock us that Mamdani won the election? I don't know if you realize what's going on in Israel as well. The entire Israeli government is shaking like never before. They found now so much corruption that Israel is reeling. It is so crazy what's happening now in the world. It's like everything is unraveling. Okay. Rabbi Weisberg says he's certain that this is the date based on his, and he goes through and he does a really good job on this. Should we just take him for his word, or perhaps maybe we should see if we have any indication to like lend in to make it stronger? So Rabbi Weisberg himself gives some powerful things. And he says that the Lubavitcher Rebbe's behavior became very interesting in 1981 and 1992. And 1982. In what sense? In 1982, it started in 1981, actually. The Rebbe suddenly, out of nowhere, frantically called for the writings for the unity of the Jewish people. We need to do things to hold the Jewish people together. And we have to create a real, true unity of all Jews. How can we do that? And the Rebbe came up with an incredible idea. All Jews, the entire Jewish people, to write a Torah together. Everybody should have a letter in the Sefer Torah, and the Torah will unify the Jewish people. And the Rebbe in 1981 began with the children. He called that every Jewish child that parents should buy a letter for their children in a Torah scroll. Special Torah scrolls were written. There's 300,000 and something letters. I don't remember the numbers of letters there are in a Torah. In order to get everybody inscribed, you'll have to write quite a few Torahs. But the Rebbe was pushing this in 1981 like crazy, as if this was an emergency. You got to write. Everybody's got a letter in the Torah. Get everybody inscribed. By the way, in 1981, that's when the Rebbe started singing, "We Want Moshiach Now." It was also a shock, the whole world. What do you mean, we want Moshiach now? The Rebbe was, we want Moshiach now. Why suddenly? What you get, what happened now? In 1982, the Rebbe included the adults. 1981, it was the children. 1982, the adults. Fasten your seatbelts. In the book of Daniel, right before, in the beginning of chapter 12, the opening of chapter 12 reads like this. Ube'esahi, and in that time, which time? The time very close to the redemption. Yamoid Michael Hasara Gadol Oimed al B'nai. The archangel Michael, will stand, who is the lawyer of Israel, who is in charge of always advocating for the Jewish people. He's the opposite of Satan, who brings accusations. So he's going to, at that time, God is going to put him up emergency, because there is going to be a lot of forces trying to take Israel down. And hear the words, this is scary. There will be a time of trouble that never was from when the Jewish people became a nation. Ada Esahi, until that time. Ube Esahi, and in that time, Yemolet Amcha, your nation will escape. Who? Kol Nimtza Kosov Basefer. Whoever is found to be written in the book. Which book? You want to make sure you get yourself your name in that book, because only those who will be written in the book will be saved. It's going to be a time of trouble for Israel like there was never, ever in all of history, and we've had some pretty bad times. And you got to get yourself in the book. Which book is this? Rashi gives an cryptic answer. It's anything written in a book through the dreams that are written in it. Which book? Which dreams? Maybe he means the book of Daniel, those that are hidden in this book. The Metzude says there is a special book that God has, a Sefer Zikaron. You have to be written into that book. So on a Farbrengen on Hanukkah, Tafshem Mem Beis, I looked it up. Hanukkah, and again, I heard this also from Rabbi Weisberg. The Rebbe gave a talk on Hanukkah 1980. Tafshem Mem Beis, I don't think it's 1982 yet. It's still, maybe it was 1981 still before January. But it's in the Hebrew date. It's not. It's 5742. Tafshem Mem Beis. The Rebbe in the third sikha that he said on that Shabbos, the Rebbe said, there is something that I received from overseas. Someone sent me, someone sent me a letter from overseas, which made me so excited and so happy from what I received from this person, that knowledge deserves for me to make a Farbrengen just for that. And really, therefore, the fact that I am saying this only in the third sikha, and I didn't say it in the first or second, I should have opened up with this. The Rebbe first spoke about Hanukkah, and then I think the first two talks were about Hanukkah, maybe about the Parsha. And then he speaks about this thing that he's going to say. The Rebbe said, this is so great, you're actually wondering why I'm leaving it for the third sikha. You see clearly from the Rebbe that when he gives a talk, the order is very, very important to pay attention to. He's saying things that are really, really important. I'll say it right at the beginning because it's like, but the Rebbe says, it doesn't make a difference I'm saying it in the third sikha because no one is paying attention anyways. He says, because those that are sleeping, and those that are not sleeping, but they're sleeping with their eyes open. It was like very interesting words the Rebbe says over there. And I think what the Rebbe is basically meaning, no one is really paying attention to the godly things that are taking place in front of your eyes right now. And the Rebbe says, what did he hear from overseas that got him so excited? The Rebbe says, someone sent me that perhaps that it says in Daniel, that anybody that's written in the Sefer will be saved. It's referring to the Sefer Torahs that the Rebbe is commissioning to be writ for the Jewish people. And the Rebbe said, wow, that is worthy of a Farbrengen. Basically, the Rebbe said, finally, someone is catching on to what's going on. He says, you're all walking around like zombies. You're not even paying attention to what's going on. But someone is actually, and the Rebbe is almost like blaming it. Oh, yeah, that's so good. To me, it's clear that the Rebbe's initial intention was, because in Sefer Daniel it says, everybody that will be saved will be written in the book. The Rebbe was just giving us a little glimpse that he's asking us. And as I told and I mentioned, the Rebbe was so adamant that one time before Shavuos, the Rebbe said that every Chabad Shliach should stop whatever they're doing and spend the next 48 hours, something like that, or 24 hours after, reaching as many children that they can in their communities, far and wide, find every Jewish child and have them pay $1 to buy a letter in the Torah. And I want to hear from every single one of my Hasidim how many kids you inscribed. I want to see letters from everybody. Basically, the Rebbe pulled all the stops, or whatever you call it, to get this to happen. It was like burning in him. Why? Why 1982? Because that 45-year period starts in 1982, 81, 82. In other words, the window of the coming of Moshiach is that window of 45 years, from 1290 to 1335. It begins with, and very interesting. In 1982, which corresponds to the year 5742, is the first year, listen closely, that the Rebbe gave a depiction on the name of the year. The Rebbe called Tavshem Mem Beis, like we know, Tavshin Nun, which is 5750, the Rebbe called the acronym of the year Tehei Shnas Nisim. It should be the year of miracles. In Tavshin Nun Aleph, the Rebbe said Tehei Shnas Niflois Erenu. We should see wonders. When did the Rebbe start that? It wasn't done in the Lamids. In the 30s and the 70s, it wasn't done. It started in the 80s, not in 81. It started in 82. With which year? 82. And you know what the Rebbe called Tavshem Mem Beis? Tia Shnas Bias Mashiach. It should be the year of Bias Mashiach, of Mashiach's coming. And the Rebbe continued afterwards. Tia Shnas Geulas Mashiach, or Tia Shnas. The next year was Tia Shnas Gilui Mashiach, that Mashiach should be revealed. And the next year was Tia Shnas Dibur Mashiach, that Mashiach is talking. And so the Rebbe was running with Mashiach from that day on. Why? Why in 1982? What's going on? What's going on suddenly? Now, most of us are not paying attention. But now we can retroactively start looking back and saying, hey, and to really, really stun you all, I take out the next book, which is the Hayom Yom, which is the Rebbe's first book that he published. And in the opening of the Hayom Yom is short little Hasidic teachings that Hasidim read. It's basically a Hasidic calendar. Every day of the year, you have a short little inspiration teaching that's supposed to be with you the whole day. Now, how did this book produced? In 1943, I think, the Rebbe's father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak, commissioned his son-in-law, his future Rebbe, to make this book. And what the Rebbe did was he took from his father-in-law's talks and took little snippets and entered each one for a different day. And I'm sure there is the deepest secrets of existence that are in those teachings of why this teaching is this day and why whatever. That's my hunch. And this is the first work of the Rebbe. He wrote, man, since then the Rebbe's books are like so many, but this is his first work. Now, in the Hayom Yom, there is a introduction. The introduction is a biography of the Chabad Rebbe's. In 1943, when the book was published the first time, the biography went from the first 6 Rebbe's and it ended there. Because at that time, there were only 6 Chabad Rebbe's. In 1982, they were giving out a new edition. The book was being republished. And Rabbi Weisberg relates that the man in charge of this, of putting it out, was Rabbi Michal Zelikson. And Rabbi Weisberg says that I worked with him. So he's got inside story on it, inside information on it. And he relates that Rabbi Zelikson, that was adding in, I'm not sure it was the first time, maybe it was the first time, that they were adding into this publication of the Hayom Yom a biography on the Rebbe. Because by now, the Rebbe is already Rebbe for 30 years. So now you can write a lot about the Rebbe. So again, it started with the biography of the Alter Rebbe, and the first 6 were already written in, but now the Rebbe's turn. They added in the Rebbe. But they had the Rebbe added in until 1982. And in every year, they just like with the Alter, the Rebbe would, in the first 6 Rebbes, the Rebbe would say, this year, this happened. This year, this happened. Major event. The Rebbe moved from this town to this town. The Rebbe then opened up the yeshiva Tamchet Tamimim. The Rebbe did this. The Rebbe was arrested. You know, all the various different accomplishments and things that were done. The first Hasidic book was printed. Torah, whatever was happening. So in the Rebbe as well, the Rebbe is the longest biography. Like goes on and on and on. So in 1982, so Rabbi Zelikson handed it into Rebbe, and the Rebbe gave him footnotes, editing his own biography of himself. And he told him, you omitted something in 1982. What did you omit? He said, number one, because he writes about the Sefer Torahs, but that the Rebbe was then encouraging to write global Torahs. But the Rebbe said, you should add in that it was done, that the Rebbe says, that he says, referring to himself, that he is publicizing that the mitzvah of writing these Torahs are connected to the end of the exile. Because the exile is now ending, we're doing the mitzvah, and that it says in certain books that writing a Torah is the last mitzvah. It's the last mitzvah of the 613. Therefore, it's related to the last moments of, it's the end of exile. That's when you do this mitzvah. You know, this mitzvah becomes applicable at the end of exile, so it's written in books. That's the first thing the Rebbe told him to add. The second thing the Rebbe said to add, he publicizes, referring to himself, that 1982 is the case that is mentioned, the ultimate case, the end time is 1982. Again, let's hear that again. The Rebbe goes and puts into his own biography. He doesn't want to omit that. That's very important to him. That it should say about his accomplishments that in 1982, the Rebbe declared that in some Sfarim it says that 1982 is the case, is the year of the final end of exile. Now, Zelikson was surprised. And the Rebbe continues, wait. And go outside and see what people are saying. When you ask people, what is this? The Rebbe adds, go outside and see. It's a phrase in the Talmud. Go check, go ask, go do a survey in the street. And you'll see that people say that Tafshin Mem Beis stands for Tieshnas Bias Mashiach. So the Rebbe wanted that phrase inside the Mem Beis accomplishments of Tafshin Mem Beis. He puts that in, that the Rebbe said that it says in books that Tafshin Mem Beis is the end time. First of all, you're not allowed to reveal the end time. It's actually a prohibition. Why are we saying it now? Because it has arrived. But why is the Rebbe saying it? But Zelickson had a problem because the Rebbe said two things in the names of books. The first thing the Rebbe said in the name of books is that the mitzvah of writing a Torah is the last mitzvah because it's connected with the end of exile. Kind of, we have to write Torahs at the end of exile. So Zelickson said, give me the source. Where does it say? Which books are you referring to? Because the Rebbe always put everything the Rebbe said was always with a source. So Zelickson asked the Rebbe, I hear what you're saying, but give me a source. And then Zelickson asked the Rebbe the second question. It says in books that 1982, Tafshem Mem Beis is the case. Which books are you referring to? And the Rebbe answered in a note. The first thing says in the book Ben Ish Chai. And the second thing about Tafshem Mem Beis is in the Chassam Sofer, Ala Torah. Ben Ish Chai was a great Sephardic rabbi, a great halachic authority from Baghdad, and Rabbi Yosef Chaim Azulai. And here's a picture of him. And he was also a master Kabbalist. Okay, this is his book. And the Chassam Sofer was even before him in the early 19th century. I think he passed away in 1834. Was the great Hungarian rabbi, not really Hungary, Oberland, whatever, from Pressburg, Moshe Sofer, who was basically one of the greatest rabbis of Eastern Europe in the 18th century, and not just for the 18th century. He's like huge, the Chassam Sofer. So the Rebbe says in the book of Chassam Sofer, in this parsha, you'll see he says Tafshem Mem Beis. So Zelickson and Rabbi Weisberg, I don't know if he was part of it, went to look up the sources. And they find it because the Rebbe said, actually, this idea about the Sefer Torah being the last mitzvah, therefore it's connected to the end of Golos, is the first piece in Ben Ish Chai, in the entire Ben Ish Chai. It's the first teaching in Ben Ish Chai, in Parshas Bereshis. However, what they noticed is that the Ben Ish Chai hardly says it. You can squeeze it into his words, but he doesn't say it. The Ben Ish Chai mentions the fact that writing a Torah is the last Torah, last mitzvah, but he explains that learning Torah creates souls, draws down souls in the world, which hastens the redemption. So very, very difficult to say that he's talking about writing a Torah. And he brings that writing a Torah is the last mitzvah, so that when you're Isaac b'Torah, when you study Torah, you're actually hastening the redemption and whatever. And when the Rebbe usually gives a source, it's usually a much stronger source. This is a very, very, very poor source. It's almost like they're looking for an excuse to hide behind someone, and he found it, and he said, here, look over here. The second source the Rebbe gives for the Chassam Sofer, which mentions 1982 as an end date, they looked it up. The Chassam Sofer indeed says the words Tafshem Mem Beis, but he's not talking about 1982. He says, the Chassam Sofer gives his own case of when Moshiach is going to come. And he says, it's 1,000 years plus 782. So it's 1782 since the temple was destroyed. 1,782 years since the temple was destroyed, which lands you in the year 1810. So the Chassam Sofer was hoping that in his days Mashiach would come. He lived in that time. In 1810, he was hoping for the redemption. So 1810 in the Hebrew year is the year, I don't know which year it was, Tafresh Yud, which corresponds to the year, it's 1,782, Tafshin Mem Beis is 782, since the destruction of the temple. So the Chassam Sofer never says that the year 1982, which is going to be 150 years after the Chassam Sofer, is going to be the time of Mashiach. And yet the Rebbe says, it says in books that Tafshin Mem Beis. It doesn't say that Tafshin Mem Beis. It just uses the word Tafshin Mem Beis. Anybody who looks sees that it's. Now the Rebbe, we know, never, ever, ever gives poor sources. He's usually bringing strong sources. Why is he giving? It became clear to these rabbis, or at least to Rabbi Weisberg. I don't know about Rabbi Michal Zelikson, but and this is what he shares on his. I'm a lot of my class is what he says, most of it. But I'm excited about it, and I'm sharing it to the audience that maybe didn't listen or forgot what he said, or maybe don't listen. I know a lot of people listen to me, listen to him too. So, but it's okay if I'm repeating the reasons. It's a good refresher. But I'm sharing it because he shared it 5 years ago, and usually YouTube's the videos you do 5 years ago, they're forgotten now, and people are on to new stuff. I think, and 5 years ago, I didn't want to hear of it, but now it's exciting to me. So listen to this. This is crazy. He comes to the conclusion that the Rebbe was seeking to hide behind others for all these statements. The Rebbe did not know this from a Chassam Sofer. The Rebbe did not choose to do this from the Ben Ish Chai. The Rebbe was trying to camouflage what he knows. How does he know it? He knows it intrinsically because so he was revealed to him from heaven, that is the case. Or he knows it because he cracked the code, what it says in the book of Daniel. Just he cracked it 30 years before Weisberg. And the Rebbe writes, when he says, it says some Sepharim, it says that this is the case. You know which Sepharim it might be? When he tells Zelikson to write that it says in books that the year 19. Now, again, the Rebbe didn't just tell him to write it. The Rebbe told him to add it into his own biography. That means this is one of my accomplishments of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that he reveals a case of 1982, which didn't happen. No, never happened. 1982, Moshiach didn't come. Wouldn't the Rebbe then later tell him next year, take it out? No, he still has control. He didn't say to take it out. The Rebbe wasn't guessing. The Rebbe knew absolutely certain 1982 was the year. 1982 was the 1290, the first emergence of Moshiach. So you'll say, where was he? Where? Well, you have to just in 1982 look around the world and figure out who is talking about Mashiach, who is driving the world insane about Mashiach, who has reached the entire world and explodes in Judaism and touching all the Jews and influencing, and is the only one who's got his literally his finger on the pulse of everything in Israel, of everything in the entire, whatever is all one person. The Rebbe was basically revealing himself in 770 in 1982. And that's why from 1982 and onward, the Rebbe went gung-ho Mashiach. The Rebbe didn't want to wait 45 years. Now, there was a concealment on the Rebbe, but that started, not 45. The concealment of the Rebbe started in 1994 in a full, and in 1992 partially when the Rebbe had the stroke. It doesn't have to be a concealment of the 45, but there is a first emergence, and then there is a pulling back, and there is another emergence. And when the Rebbe says, it says in the books, which book is he referring to? The book of Daniel. That's the book. When he says a book, which book? The book of Daniel. And that's the case. And it fits exactly because it's 1290 from when the mosque was, from when the Dome of the Rock was placed on the Beis Hamikdash. So is anybody wondering why there is so much tension now in the world this year? We're in the zone. Now, I was going to continue with something, but I don't have the time, and I will let you listen to Weisberg. And in his initial talks about this, maybe I'll do it in the next class. He reveals the most beautiful, craziest story that relates to all of this. Because he asked the question, the Rebbe said that I publicized that 1982 will be the case. But the only place the Rebbe publicized it is by telling is by telling Zelickson to put it in his book. The Rebbe never said that 1982 is the year of the Kates. In all of his talks that he gave that year, he just told Zelickson. Why didn't Zelickson put it in to begin with? Because the Rebbe never said it in the talks. The only thing is, he referred to the year as Shnas Bias Mashiach. Good, that can be a blessing. It's not like you're declaring that that's the Kates, that's the end time. The Rebbe didn't get up on a mega microphone and say, hey, guys, it says in the book of Daniel, 1290. 1290 is from the Dome of the Rock. Now is the year. Not only, the only thing the Rebbe ever did to reveal that was, he told Zelickson to put it in his book. Is that what the Rebbe means he publicized? Did he ever publicize it? Yes, he did. There is a sicha, a talk that the Rebbe issued that year. And this is in Likutei Sichos Chelik Chaf, the volume 20 in Likutei Sichos. On page 234, there is an entire sicha. That year, isn't that crazy? That year the Rebbe published, every year the Rebbe would give out a talk. That year the Rebbe published this particular sicha on Parshas Vayechi. Which sicha was it? It was the talk of the Rebbe where the Rebbe spoke about how Yaakov wanted to reveal the Kates. And God made him, took away that. And the Rebbe explains why did Yaakov want to reveal and why not. A whole long explanation. So in footnote 50, the Rebbe brings that there are other great tzaddikim who revealed the Kates, like the Alter Rebbe, who revealed a certain Kates, and this one and that one. And then the Rebbe brings these words. Haherani chacham echad, one wise man told me, Shebe Sefer Devar Nitzav, that in the book Devar Nitzav, Laharav Naftali Tzvi Brach Mekasho, from Reb Naftali Tzvi Brach of Kasho. Parshas Toldos Ubahar, in the two Parshios, Toldos Ubahar, Mechashiv HaKates, he actually makes the Kates, Lishnas Tavshim Membeis. Ooh, the Rebbe found himself an actual book who says Membeis is going to be the redemption. And which book is this? A book from Reb Naftali Tzvi Brach. Who is Rebbe Naftali Tzvi Brach? My wife's cousin, if you want to know. My wife's family is Brach. Now, this Brach, there was a great tzaddik and rabbi, a Hungarian rabbi called Reb Shol Brach. He's my wife's great-grandfather. Not great-grandfather, great-great-uncle. He was a famous rabbi. He had a son who was a rabbi in Magendorf. And his name was Reb Naftali Tzvi. He was murdered by the Nazis during the war. He left writings that was later found by his disciples or whatever. They published the book, in a book, Devar Nitzav, that not too many people heard about. It's not a very famous book, and it's not a very famous rabbi. It's a very obscure book by a pretty quiet rabbi. It's like there are people that are very famous. He was not. He's a quiet rabbi. He was killed in the war. The Rebbe somehow finds his book, we'll see in a moment, and says that in his book it says 1982 is the case. And by the way, if you look in the book, he doesn't come to it from Daniel. He has his own calculation, how he comes to that year. And that's how the Rebbe made good. The Rebbe said that he's going to publicize the Kates. The Rebbe himself told Zelickson, I am publicizing. But by the time when he told it to Zelickson, he hadn't publicized it yet. So the Rebbe had to fulfill his word. He said, I'm going to publish. Where did he publicize it? In his book, Likutei Sichos. This book is to be found across the globe, because Chabad is everywhere, and every Lubavitcher has a set of Likutei Sichos. And a lot of non-Chabadniks also. So by the Rebbe putting it into his book, that it says that Tavshin Mem Beis is the Shnas of the Kates, the Rebbe made the biggest publicity for it, a big publicity. So the Rebbe did keep his word that he's going to publicize. But yet he publicized it in such a quiet way. And again, he's hiding behind everybody else. He's blaming it on Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Brach. He hides behind the Chassam Sofer where it doesn't even say in the Chassam Sofer. He barely, it says the words Tavshem and Beis, but it doesn't mean that. Why? The answer is very simple. there's a prohibition to reveal the kates. The Rebbe doesn't want to do it. The Rebbe doesn't want to stick his head out. You're not allowed to do it. So the sages say you're not allowed to do it. The Rebbe can't do it. So he's hiding behind everybody else that they did it. They revealed. Like, he's not going to do it. Now, but if you're not allowed to do it, why are you doing it? The answer is, I guess, this is Rabbi Weisberg's explanation. The Rebbe knew that in the end of the 45 years, it's going to be discovered. In other words, the Rebbe knew that it should be revealed. Like this class that we're giving this today is going to be a class that's going to reach hundreds of people, thousands of people, maybe. Rabbi Weisberg's class is going to, which he gave 5 years ago, is going to reach thousands of people. And it's important for the Jewish people to get ready for the redemption immediately. So now, the Rebbe wanted it to be there. If he wanted it published back then in 1982, he could have made a much bigger publicity. He didn't want. He slipped it in because the Rebbe knew 45 years. It's the beginning of a period. And that's why he was demanding, we want Moshiach now, because the Rebbe was hoping he can push it without having to have the Moshiach being revealed, the Moshiach being concealed. As the leader of the generation, he doesn't want to put us through that misery. He wants to accelerate the redemption. But he also, if God forbid it gets dark, he wants us to know what's going on. If Mamdani wins the election, he wants us to take a chill pill and know, guys, it's good. How did the Rebbe get this book? I'm going to finish. I told you I'm not going to tell you the story, but it's such a good story, I have to tell you the story. Again, I heard this from Rabbi Weisberg on that chair, and here's the story. The Rebbe writes over here, a chacham, a wise man, showed me the book Devar Nitzav. Who is this wise man that the Rebbe is referring to? So Weisberg relates the story as follows. And it's connected to my family. I took a special enjoyment because I'm connected to this story through my wife's family and through my own family. Isn't that interesting? And I'm the big Moshiach addict. And yet I'm connected to this story. How? My wife, I told you, is a great niece or a cousin to this Reb Naftali Tzvi Brach. My wife's mother's name is Brach. Straight up to this family. And the other side of the story is as follows. Exactly a year ago, I went to Poland to visit my ancestor, first time ever. So I was staying in Krakow, and then we drove out about 45 minutes, an hour, to a little town called Dębic. That's where my family was hidden by a Polish doctor in an attic, 13 people from 1942 to 1944. A miracle, they were saved. So the first time ever last year, I went to see the city and the town and the whole thing. The big city next to Dębic, and that's I saw signs the whole time, is called Rajsza, or they have some other Rajsza, and how they pronounce it in Polish, I'm not sure. Rajsza, it's an airport there. It's a pretty decent big city. In the city of Rajsza in 1922, there was a Rebbe. His name was Rebbe Chana Halberstam. He was a grandson of the Tzanzer Rebbe, Reb Chaim of Tzanz. And he was known as the Kolishitzer Rebbe. Because before he came to Rajsza, which is a big city, he was rabbi in Kolishitz. So the name Kolishitz stuck to him. My grandparents were Kolishitzer Hasidim. So now here's the connection. My grandparents were Hasidim of this Rebbe of Kolishitz. We were Stechina Hasidim. That's all these Rebbes all lived in that same area, in Galicia. So my great-grandfather traveled to Kolishitz. Very holy, big tzaddik. So listen to this crazy story. Reb Chana of Kolishitz there was a young man living in Rajsza at that time. His name was Reb Chaim Yeshia What a beautiful voice. He was a chazan. He sang beautifully, and they loved when he just got married. Then he was 22 years old, I think, at that time, and he would and people love. Yeah, but he was also someone who just had a heart of gold. And when there were ever anybody in town who was in trouble for every reason, needed money, a couple needed money to pay the rent, or someone needed money for the wedding, or he would make it his business to raise the funds. He would collect for people. He was always busy helping Jews. He was a heart of gold. But he also had a beautiful voice, and he knew how to sing beautifully and whatever. One time, there was a Jew in that town who fell into legal trouble and was arrested, and he needed money to post bail or to pay a fine and go out of jail completely. He didn't have the money. So Reb Chaim Yeshua was trying to raise the funds for him. And as hard as he tried, he couldn't come up with the money that he needed. And he was very frustrated. Not knowing what to do, he went to the Rebbe of the city, the great rabbi, the Kolashitzer, and he said, Rebbe, I'm trying my best. I can't raise the money. So the Kolashitzer Rebbe said to him, Chaim Shia, I'm going to give you a good plan. He said, Purim is coming, and I have a great idea. In the towns in those days, was a custom, and they do it still in many Hasidic rabbis, courts. They create a comical Rebbe for the day. That means called a Purim Rebbe. He becomes a Rebbe just for Purim. He dresses the garb. He wears the shtreimel, the whole thing, and he wears the white, the kaftan, and he has a gabai, and he basically plays Rebbe. And he's usually takes someone who's funny, so he can say Torah. When he says Torah, he says comical Torah, not Torah that's just like really funny and weird and silly, and that's called Purim Torah. But on Purim Day, he makes merry and everybody treats him as a Rebbe. So Reb Chaim, so the Rebbe said, I'm going to let out a thing in the city that this year you're the Purim Rebbe. You're going to be the Purim. You have a good voice. You'll sing. You'll entertain. And I'll say that your blessings are going to be fulfilled. Now, everybody knew that Rabbi Chana Kalashitz was a big tzaddik, and his blessings were fulfilled. He said, I'm giving over power to you. Basically, he said, I'm going to let the city know that your blessings are going to be fulfilled. So people will come for blessings, and like the style they used to do by rabbis is that people would drop a check. That money, you will be able to raise the money. And Chaim Yeshua got very scared. He didn't want to do it, but the Rebbe said, no, you got to do it. He agreed. But he thought it wouldn't work. Purim came, and he started doing it, and everybody loved this Chaim Yeshua because he had a great voice, and they wanted to hear him, and it turned out to be the best Purim. And a lot of people and he was giving blessings, and he made a killing. He made a lot of money. And he ran, and he got to the authorities. He gave the bail, posted the bail, got this Jew out. And he was ecstatic. He left. He went back to the Kolashitzer Rebbe to thank the Kolashitzer Rebbe for the good idea, and to tell the Kolashitzer Rebbe that he got it, that this Jew is out of prison. The Kolashitzer Rebbe was smiling from ear to ear. And he said to him, I'm so thankful to you that you brought me such good news of a redemption of a Jew. I give you a bracha that you should have, listen to this gives me chills, that you should have the schus to reveal to the Jewish people the news of the geula, of the redemption. I bless you because you brought me the news of a Jew being taken out. You should have the merit to bring to the Jewish people the besura that Mashiach is coming. Besuras haketz, or the geula. Chaim Yeshua went through the Holocaust and he was saved, managed to survive. He moved to America and he settled in New Square, next to Muncie in upstate New York. There's a Hasidic group called Square, and this is a New Square. And he moved to New Square. And in New Square, he set up a family. He had, I think, 4 or 5 daughters and 1 son. His son's name was Yisrael Mendel. Now, this Reb Chaim Yeshua lived a nice long life, and he passed away, and he didn't reveal the time of the Mashiach. But his son did. This Yisrael Mendel lived in Crown Heights. Maybe he was a Lubavitcher. I'm not sure. If he's living in Crown Heights in the 1980s, I would imagine that it was. But that time weren't many other. Maybe not. Some others that lived in Crown Heights by then. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But this Yisrael Mendel's father was a Skvera Chassid. First a Kolashitzer, and then he ended up in Square. This Yisrael Mendel had the book Devar Nitzav. He was this book from Rabbi Shaul Brach, and he saw Tavshem Mem Beis. He thought, who would appreciate that Tavshem Mem, that this rabbi from before the war wrote in his book that Tavshem Mem Beis is going to be the redemption? Who would appreciate? He was in Krana. He said the Rebbe would appreciate. So he went and he made a copy of that page or whatever, or he gave the whole book. I'm not sure, and he sent it into the Rebbe that in the book Dvar Nitzav from Reb, the son of Naftali Tzvi Brach, who died in the Holocaust. His book, it says Tavshem Mem Beis. That's what the Rebbe used when the Rebbe says a Chacham Echad in Sefer showed me who's the wise man who showed him. It's this Yisrael Mendel, the son of Reb Chaim Mashiach of Pshemish, who the Kolashitzer Rebbe told him that you're going to merit to reveal to the Jewish people the coming of the Mashiach. Now, he actually did, because by telling the Rebbe this, that's how the Rebbe used to publicize that Tavshem Mem Beis is the case. So you're going to say, well, Tavshem Mem Beis passed and it didn't come. No, it did come. That's the Shnaz Bias Mashiach. There was a dark period told to us in Daniel that in that dark period it's going to get very dark. And it's going to be trouble to the Jewish people. And whoever is going to be saved are those that are written in the book. And the Rebbe goes and starts making everybody crazy to be written in that book, which is the book of the Torah, to unify the Jewish people. And no one catches on to what's going on under their noses. The Rebbe once said these words. The Rebbe said, you are standing. The Rebbe once said by the Farbrengen to the Hasidim, you are standing and you're gazing at the biggest treasure of all of history. Literally, you're looking at the biggest treasure of all of history and you're totally not realizing what's going on. You know why? Because you're so busy looking this way and that way and that way and that way, and you're not catching on what you're looking at. What was the Rebbe referring to? The Rebbe was referring to himself. Hello, the Rebbe was saying, do you guys even begin to understand what's going on here? He was trying to wake them up. So what's the good news? The good news is the 45 years are coming to a very, very, very quick conclusion. We're in the year 44. We're in the year 45. Whatever. We're there. So what do? We get ready. It's time to do extra mitzvahs. It's time to learn a lot of Torah. It's time to be besimcha. It's time to be a proud Jew. Because what we are going to witness, no other generation, no other people, no one has ever seen. We are in the hot zone. It's ground zero now. And I believe that last night's election really, really, really sealed the deal. And as I said earlier, the stadium is packed. Everybody's looking at the ring, and one of the fighters went in already thinking he's the unbeatable. Moshiach is upon us. But you know what? I'd be very, very happy if I'm wrong. And I'd be very, very happy if Mamdani becomes the sweetest and most beautiful mayor and he brings all New Yorkers to Moshiach happily and joyfully, and he doesn't try to fight the Jewish people, I'd be very happy. That would be even a much beautiful miracle. That Moshiach has turned over the heart of even those who don't like us. But if God forbid, whatever, over the next few months, it shouldn't happen. Mashiach don't have to wait the next few months. But let's stay focused on the big prize. And everything's going to be good. Hashem will protect us. And a good thing to do, if you're not written in, get yourself written into one of those. And if you have a new grandchild, make sure your grandchild is written in. How's that? That's what we did in my family. Whenever any child was born, immediately we called up. You can look it in. It's called Unity Torah. You can find it online. Anybody listening to this class, if you're Jewish, this is written for the Jewish people. So if you're Jewish, your mother's Jewish, get yourself a letter. I think they charge $2 because, I think $1 for the thing, and then they have to send you a certificate, and it's a whole situation. Whatever, it's worth it. Make sure your children, make sure your grandchildren, newborn kids, everybody gets into a letter in the Torah. You want to be inscribed in that book. You also want to fasten your seatbelts, because I believe things are going to get interesting now. Even more interesting than they've been. I only pray to God that we should all be safe and sound, and no one should be harmed, and everything should be beautiful. Amen, amen, and amen. Thank you.